It's also really important to make sure you know what you're doing and what medications are capable of. If you don't know what medications...
Sorry.
Oh my God, that's an expensive book.
Right?
Sorry.
It's not that expensive. So if you don't know what a medication is capable of, chances are you're not going to adequately be safe with it. So you need to ensure that you know what the medications are capable of. The legislation that deals with medication, we're going to talk about that very briefly. It is important for you guys to know it is not going to make up a large portion of National Registry's exam when you get to that point. At the same time, it is something you need to be aware of so you understand the process by which medications are made available to you. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I hear about something that can save lives and there's a huge hold-up to actually us seeing it on the street, it frustrates the bejesus out of me. For instance, did you guys know that there is actually a vaccine for Ebola? Have you guys read about that? Did you hear the CDC update? That they're now saying that they pushed it along and they are hoping to make it available in 2015, early 2015. That's kind of crazy. So where was this vaccine this past year?
Hidden in a government facility. Where was the phase 3 trial?
Well, and then say it again, say it louder.
Where was the phase 3 trial?
Where was that phase 3 trial? What is a phase 3 trial?
Absolutely
It's the
necessary.
Comes
trial,
after
efficacy,
6 months.
and safety trial from the FDA.
Where
And-
most of them fail, if not before. So then you are harming people when you give it to them without it.
So we're going to talk about stages of trials. We're going to talk about what occurs when a trial, when a drug doesn't make it to a trial. We're going to talk about efficacy standards in terms of animal testing and human testing, because yeah, they have to go through testing phases before they're made commercially available or available to us as the public. So it's a couple things we're going to talk about. And then we really get into the important stuff that you guys will use on a regular basis, and that includes the schedules of the drugs, the naming, and the classification. When we talk about schedulings, it's not like time and date when you're going to give them. It's going to be talking about the classifications and what the drugs are and what they're capable of. So their schedules are like their Class C categories for safety and pregnancy and so on and so forth. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. This is going to move fast tonight. If I'm going too fast, you guys have to tell me that. We're going to have a couple different subjects and some new terms. Pharmacokinetics is something that you guys have to be really familiar with, and that is, how is a drug interacting with the human body? Is it a situation where you give it and it's not magic? We don't give the medication and it works its strange magic and everyone's okay. There are reasons. There are reasons and biotransformations that occur within us that actually make these medications do what they do. So when we give a medication, we're giving it for a very specific reason, and we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about a lot of things in terms of biotransformations that occur internally. And that's where I said just recently, we're going to go back a lot of our pathophysiology and anatomy and physiology. So this is one of those situations where we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk a lot about how the human body reacts. We're going to talk about storage and security of medications. Because what do we encounter a lot of times pre-hospitally in terms of storage issues and security? How many of you guys have been robbed out of an ambulance? I have been absolutely robbed out of the ambulance. Do you guys remember that really nasty storm that blew through last year? Stronger than the storm down in New Jersey. Remember that one? Remember it? Remember it? Yeah. Okay, so when Sandy hit, I got robbed. I got totally robbed right out of my truck. Someone came in and they broke in. They stole my wallet, my phone, and my jacket.
We've
When I
had
was on
multiple
call.
trucks stolen.
Oh, what's that?
The entire truck.
Yeah, we've had
Seriously?
We had the whole truck
Multiple
stolen.
times.
I've only had that occur once, and it was not me.
You guys
Thank
don't have the
heavens.
MVPs, right?
Nope.
Nope.
We have Penn Star.
We have Penn Star.
We just
To do
launched
our
them and
search
said, go
for
look
us.
for our ambulance in the sky, and they did. And they found it.
All right, so back to this. So we're going to talk about pharmacology. We're going to talk about metabolism and excretion. When we give a medication, oftentimes we're doing it in the heat of the moment. And we don't necessarily, as paramedics and emergency medical professionals, think about the excretion process and how long that medication is going to be in that person's body and really doing its magic versus damage. So when we administer a medication, it's important for us to know how long it's going to be in the body and what those side effects can be. So, again, we're going to talk about how the body breaks it down in the metabolism portion. We're going to talk about mechanisms of action. And when we say mechanism of action, it means how that body actually does what it does internally. So when I say to you mechanism of action for albuterol, what what was that? Now that you guys are experts on albuterol, despite what Blackboard says.
Affects the beta 2 receptors to cause bronchodilation.
Okay, cool. Yeah, absolutely. And that was said in Italian, so I appreciate it. So yes, it absolutely opens the bronchodilators. So really well said. Yeah, absolutely. So it's beta 2. So when we talk about the mechanism of action, it's how does that medication work? What is it stimulating? What is it not stimulating? What is it blocking that makes that medication work internally? And then phases of medication activity. What are we talking about when we say a phase of a medication activity? Well, we have a couple different phases of actually being able to take that medication in. We have onset, duration, we have excretion, metabolism. So there's all kinds of things that we're going to talk about tonight that you guys have to be aware of. So medication responses and relationships. What does that mean? Are they going in and like hooking up inside?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, they are. There's like a party inside your body. Okay, and when you have the wrong mix of medications coming into party, it's a problem. For instance, what's Narcan do?
Reverse
It reverses what?
opiate receptor.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so it bonds to, haven't gotten there yet. So, but long and short of it, kind of layman's terms, when you administer a Narcan, it actually reverses that opioid or that opiate. Okay, and it stops the receptors from being able to recept it and kind of break it down. So when we have a situation where you administer a Narcan to someone who legitimately has pain, what then is not going to be able to function in that system?
Pain medication.
Yeah, pain medication. So when you over-administer a medication that has an opioid derivative or is an opioid derivative, and you realize, oh my gosh, I totally knocked out this person's respiratory drive, and now you give them a little bit of Narcan, the problem is, yeah, you fix the respiratory rate, but now you can't manage their pain. So we're going to talk about that internal mechanism of action and medication relationships. We're going to talk about alcohol a lot tonight. Everyone's like, woo! Not so much, because when you treat people who are intoxicated, it adds a whole other layer of what we can and can't do pre-hospitally in terms of medication administration. How many of you guys have taken NyQuil? How many of you guys have had NyQuil and chased it with a beer? Once. Once. I didn't mean to. I wasn't even thinking about that. I had a wicked cold. A couple people were over. I was like, yeah, I'll take a drink. It was probably more like, yeah, I'll take a drink. And I was just a hot mess. I fell asleep and I was out. And the reason was because, again, you go back to that medication interactions. Well, what is alcohol?
Depressant.
It's a depressant, right? It's a sedative. And then you take NyQuil, which has Benadryl in it, and oh my gosh, now you've got 2 sedatives, and 2 sedatives don't make it right. So it was a mess. And then we're going to talk about toxicity. What occurs when you have too much of the medication? And again, too much of the medication doesn't necessarily mean that you overdosed somebody or that someone has received too much medication. Toxicity can occur over time, where the body can't metabolize or excrete it in time, so they just ultimately have more and more build up in their system, and it becomes a toxic level. So, we just talked about it. This whole slide was basically me coming in and saying, so, pharmacology is awesome. It's the first time that you get to be ALS providers. It's your first ALS skill. And it really is something absolutely phenomenal. Think about it. You can go in and you can take over body's mechanisms and actually manipulate it to do what you want. That's a lot of control. How many people in here have kids? Don't you wish that medications always worked the way that they really ought to? Because my kid's fighting a nasty fever, and that Tylenol's not working the way I want it to. Listen, seriously, someone would have to be like on their deathbed for me to call 911. All right, so here's the thing. When I opened up this topic and I said that you guys as paramedics should have a healthy fear and respect of medications, I was not kidding, because medications can kill. We can absolutely kill people. And I promise you, this is my promise to you, and it's on video, so you know what happened. My promise to you is that someone in this room, probably more than one, probably in fact every single one of you, will mess up medication and giving it to a patient at least one time in your career. And you will do it once, and you will never do it again. And hopefully it happens when you're a student, so you have someone looking over your shoulder as the EMS angel who can fix it. That's right. Hopefully you're with a clinical preceptor. I will tell you mine. I overdosed someone by 8 milligrams of morphine. That's a lot of morphine.
At least you get dark.
I had an 80-year-old woman, and it's well documented, trust me. It was an 80-year-old woman complaining of chest pain. It was right around the time that we started doing 12 leads regularly. So we had a 12 lead on her, and we were getting her into the back of the ambulance, and my preceptor said, so you want to give her some morphine? We did the nitro, we had done aspirin, she had oxygen on, and I said, yeah, let's give her a little bit of morphine. And so my preceptor said at the time, how much morphine are you going to give? And I said 2 milligrams. And she said, okay, so she handed me a 2 milliliter vial containing 10 milligrams. So how many milligrams per milliliter? I'm going to say it again. 2 milliliter vial. 1 milliliter, 2 milliliter. 10 within. So each milliliter had how many milligrams? 5. I didn't realize that because I was so excited to be administering morphine. So I did my thing. I went right medication, right dose. I'm so thrilled. And I then decided to give Grandma 10 milligrams of morphine in 2 milliliters. And my preceptor grabbed it and went, Danielle, what did you do? And Grandma said to me, thank you. I feel so much better. And we laid her flat, and we monitored her blood pressure and called command. And to this day, I will never forget the look on my preceptor's face, who was a very good friend of mine, Kathy Brennan Cavanaugh, when she said to me, you've overdosed this patient by 8 milligrams. And I walked in like almost sobbing to the ER. I was so upset with myself. And the doctor was like, hey, listen, I'm putting her on a morphine drip. You did her a favor. Don't ever do that again. And it could have been really bad. It could have absolutely been horrible. Her blood pressure went down because morphine vasodilates. But at the same time, it was a learning experience. And to this day, I would never, ever overdose a patient or do that again. Now I understand unequivocally the difference between milligrams and milliliters. And so will you, because every time you go to administer a medication, you're going to think, that dunce Danielle almost killed someone because she gave too much morphine. Okay? And by the way, when I graduated from medic school, they gave me a syringe, morphine syringe, with a bow on it. That was my graduation gift from the medics. They later hired me. I was there for several years. But even so, that was my one. So here's hoping you have your one and it doesn't hurt anyone. So pharmacology is a scientific study of how various substances interact or alter the function of living organisms. That's really the only thing I'm going to read from the slide directly because that's an actual definition that you guys are going to have to be aware of. That you're going to see. You're absolutely going to see that on National Registry. You're going to see that definition. You need to close your eyes at night and see that definition on the inside of your eyelids because you're going to see that. They're going to say, what's the definition of pharmacology, or they're going to give you the actual, this portion, and say, what is it? So you guys have to know that. But really, it's just how medication functions in the body, and that is the entire study of that. So this is not new. Pharmacology is not new. It's been around for a really, really long time. Humans have always sought to fix people and reach into people's bodies and make it do what they want. It's really about manipulation, and that's what we do. We as paramedics and emergency medical service providers have to manipulate people's bodies. And this is a situation, again, this is not new. In fact, a lot of old stuff we still do today. Absolutely still do today. What's willow bark? Willow bark. What you... It's used to make aspirin. Okay. Foxglove. What's foxglove? Anyone? Oh, it's a plant, sure. I'll give you extra credit if by the end of today you can tell me what foxglove is. Everyone's like, Google challenge. But yeah, so no, but it is cardiac. So again, a lot of the stuff that was used a long time ago, we still use today. Medical grade leeches, medical grade maggots. We do that. Yeah, but we still do that, and I have to tell you, they work. I mean, there's a huge amount of science saying that they work. So a lot of old stuff we use today. Evidence-based. You guys are going to see that a whole lot. Remember back a while ago, I said that we talked about
Digital.
evidence-based medication or medicine. What's that?
It's to John.
Yeah, it's to Johnson. It's pretty cool, isn't
Yeah,
it?
we said that at the same exact time. So
Yeah, but you were also Googling when I was lecturing.
We do, I do it all the time. Why is it a bad thing?
Sorry, but it is. It's digoxin, which is a cardiac medication. It's pretty cool. How many people have foxglove in their garden? You know what I mean? I do. I only have it though because it's digoxin. Sort of like that.
And then you have homegrown if you're trying to overdose somebody.
Right, and then you know. All right. So again, so we're going back to evidence-based medicine. The situation is this: when you guys have a medication and you are using it regularly, you have it for a reason. We have a medication that we use regularly in EMS and cardiac arrest that has absolutely no reason to be there. What is it?
Epinephrine.
Epinephrine. Why does epinephrine have no reason to be there?
There's no study support. Well, there's one in 2009, but it was
Come on.
pivotal.
Let's be okay. So epinephrine has been used since I came into the game, which again, that's not that long ago, but it's like 7 years. I can tell you unequivocally, for 7 years, it's been give epi until the cows come home in cardiac arrest. There's no reason for it. We don't really know why. There's some questionable reasons, but there's no real evidence that supports that. And it's really not part of our evidence-based practice. So when you talk about pharmacology, one of the questions you guys have to think for yourselves and ask yourselves is, why am I giving this? What's the evidence to support this? Okay, and a lot of times the answer is there isn't much. There isn't a whole lot. So there's a lot of testing that happens before you guys see the medication in your ambulance. What's something that happened relatively recently that is a treatment that we use regularly here in Pennsylvania now? That wasn't there before. Don't necessarily think medication, but think practice. Okay, CPAP is definitely recent, and that was a lot of evidence-based medicine and evidence-based practice. We knew that when the ALS provider got there and applied CPAP, the patient had a huge turnaround, a very positive turnaround. And after a lot of study and a lot of evidence gathered, based upon that positive evidence and positive patient outcomes, Pennsylvania decided to grant the ability for BLS providers to utilize CPAP. What else? Pit crew CPR, absolutely. Absolutely, but what about a treatment? More of like a preventative treatment. Post-CPR, I think post-CPR, preventative. Hypothermia, yeah, preventative for brain injury, post-cardiac arrest hypothermia. That was something that had a huge amount of evidence to back it up. And it was amazing. It was like very rapid evidence, at least from my end. From when I started hearing it as like a buzz term to seeing it enacted, in my opinion, it kind of happened very fast. Do you have more insight? Like, did you seem to think that that was like a rapid thing?
So it's all come about since the early 2000s. There's a study that came out last year that it kind of muddies the water a little bit because we were so set and convinced that 33 degrees was the way to go. And then it kind of said that active control of fever may be as effective as going very cold. But there's more going back and forth on that. But
Has anyone found a real practical way to do a pre-hospital program?
so there's actually a study came out of, I think it was Seattle, that found no benefit to pre-hospital cooling. The one thing that we're arguing is actually an advantage to pre-hospital cooling is it forces the ER to continue.
So we're guilty now. Because I talked to a couple vendors that are making products to try and do it. And
Yeah.
the price of them or the practical?
The best thing we can do pre-hospital is cold saline. Just get it on board, start dropping that temperature. If you have ice packs, great. But beyond that, really it's convincing them that they need to continue it because a lot of EDs, for whatever reason, hesitate to start it. Yeah, I mean, there's some that they wait until they go up to the unit, even if it's 8 hours post-arrest, and you want to get them down at maximum 6, but really as fast as you can.
All right. So when we're talking about taking new concepts and new medications, we're also talking about legislation that manages that. And the United States really utilizes something called the Food and Drug Administration. And then really that came about with the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act of 1938. When you look at your textbook, there's a little bit more than just a blurb about this. And what you have to take away from that is that this is a true process It is not just some company that sits there and kind of oversees things. This is a really long process, from testing to regulating to doing ongoing clinical trials to ensuring that the medication is consistent throughout. There's a lot of processes that go into you as an ambulance organization receiving your vials of medication. So really, when it talks in your textbook about the process and the history of medication and pharmacology and anything, it's really to give you guys an understanding that this process is very global. It's not something that is, narrow-minded or occurs just in one area. There's a lot of people involved to making this happen. Okay, so that's really all you need to take away. You do need to know the act, you do need to know the date. You will see that at some point in the near future and the very far future when you take registry. When I went through registry, I think there were like 3 or 4 questions that had dates involved. And I get that pretty regularly from students who come and they do the testing and they need to come talk to me. In fact, when you guys go do your testing, I want to hear from you. I want to know how it went. Because I like to get feedback from students as to how they think the questions are. What's that?
It's like I failed, your fault.
Yeah, well, don't call me with that. I didn't fail you, you failed you. That's like my worst, I hate that. Anyway, moving along. So when we have a new medication, it takes a really long time. It is not instantaneously, hey, there's definitely going to be a benefit here, you can have it. This takes a long time. It is a several-year process. So right now, in clinical trials, there could be medications that tomorrow are going to be the wonder drugs, and we know nothing about. There could be a lot of things in the works right now that are cures that we just don't know about. There's a lot of medications right now specific to Alzheimer's disease that show a lot of promise, and they're like several years out. They're not even making it into clinical trial yet, but we know from animal studies that they have a lot of promise. So it's kind of frustrating on our end to know that there are medications that can have such positive patient outcomes and to not have access to them. So again, it is a very long process, and just because the medications are out there doesn't necessarily mean that you and I as providers are going to have access to them anytime in the near future. So let's talk about classifications of medications. When we talk about schedules, we're talking about classifications, and we're talking about their potential for damage. So when we talk about potential for damage, we're talking about abuse and long-term abuse as well as potential for abuse. When you administer medication, there's going to be a lot of outcomes and side effects. Some of those side effects we know about, and some we can't really know about, or are very subjective. One of the things that could be subjective has to do with schedules of medication, and these are the areas potential for abuse. So you go from Schedule 1 all the way down to Schedule 5. Schedule 5, not really a whole potential for abuse. Okay, I mean, it does exist, but not really a whole lot of potential for abuse. When you get to Schedule 1, there's a lot of abuse potential here. Heroin, marijuana, LSD. We don't say that there's any recognized medical purpose for Schedule 1 medications. Now, there's always one person in the class that's like, well, wait a minute. And we could totally become paralegals instead of paramedics and talk about those uses. But I'm saying right now, as it stands, there's no medical use. Marijuana, what do we know about marijuana these days?
For cancer. Well.
Pain management, cancer, yeah, cancer patients. So there's a lot of discussion about marijuana right now. And realistically, I would say that in the next 3 or 4 years, it's going to be completely decriminalized. I really can't see that it's going to maintain much longer in the next couple of years for it to be criminal. I hope we don't get to that point. I hope we don't have it, but we'll see. Lower potential for abuse medications like narcotic cough medicine. Now here's the thing. It is part of the schedule process and the schedule table because there is always potential for abuse. If you have the right person in the right circumstance with the right background, whether it be a genetic predisposition for abuse, whether it be a social issue, whether it be a situation of financial need or bad time in their life or whatever, anything can be abused, medically speaking. At the same time, the FDA does not assign a schedule to anything less than Schedule 5. It's below Schedule 5. We're not really going to talk about it, pre-hospitally at least. When you get into the hospital, it's a lot more background. When you get into like long-term care for nursing, respiratory therapists, they go more into that. For us and purposes of our test and purposes of our function pre-hospitally, we deal with the first 5. Okay, so Schedule 1 is the worst, and it just kind of goes down from there. And Schedule 5, again, is the last thing we're going to talk about, which is a very low potential for abuse, but you have to understand there is still potential for abuse in a Schedule 5 drug.
So would Schedule 5 be like the stuff over the counter that you have to use your ID for, kind of stuff, with the potential for abuse?
I don't believe that Sudafed is considered a Schedule 5. I'd have to look into that for you, because I don't know that Sudafed itself is considered a Schedule 5, in that I know it's utilized to make other things. So does anyone know that off the top of their head?
No.
I
I
don't
think
know.
it was just to control the quantity purchased, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's used as
Yeah,
a
that's a good
Yeah.
question, because my understanding of Schedule 5 and what your text says is that something that has very small traces of
Okay.
something that is known to be, essentially known to cause abuse and known to cause, what's the word I'm looking for? It's right here, and I just need to pluck it out, and I can't.
I know what you mean.
Good, I'm glad you speak my language, because I apparently don't tonight.
Do we need to just be familiar with the schedules, or do we need to memorize which?
Familiar. Familiar.
It looks like there's about 12 states that schedule it,
Mhm.
but not.
Registry, book registry will recognize it, and in terms of speaking pharmacology, the folks who deal with it would know it.
So the DEA lists Schedule 5 as less than 200 milligrams of codeine, or Lamitil, Metafen, Lyrica, or Parapectin. I don't know that one, but those are the ones that the DEA lists.
There you go. So, again, I don't think Sudafed, but I know why. Because I just went to recently buy Sudafed, and they were like, "Can we see your ID?" Sure. Why not?
So is this being like updated constantly, or okay?
And I'm giving you guys a website. It's already on Blackboard. It's called Hippocrates. Have you guys heard of Hippocrates?
They have a really good app too.
A free app. They have a paid app, which is actually pretty cool if you guys are in the market to make a couple purchases. I think Santa's coming for some of you folks. If Santa's coming and you're looking for stocking stuffer type things from family, ask them to get you Hippocrates. And we're going to talk about it. It's pretty cool. And we're going to talk more about Hippocrates further now. But it's a free app, and then there's a paid for app that will give you medication information.
I actually think some of these actually have moved up the scale already that are in our book.
Really?
Yeah, like diazepam, I believe, is now a Schedule 3, not a Schedule 4.
And that's the thing. When we talk about pharmacology, things change so rapidly. It's really hard to be on top of it. And that's why I tell people at the beginning of class, so listen up real quick. Aunt Danielle has something to tell you, okay? Don't buy books. When it comes to medicine, please don't buy books. Your textbook should really be the only thing you guys buy. When you go through ACLS and PALS, you may have to buy a book. It's like a paperweight as soon as you walk out of the class, because that's how fast and how rapidly evolving medication is. There's so many changes so rapidly. So please invest in electronic devices, invest in electronic copies, only because then you know it's the most constantly updated information.
Do you recommend anybody for like a supplemental flashcards or an app or something for quizzes or?
Hippocrates has a really good group. I don't recommend anything because there's so many great ones out there. If you guys find things that you like and you'd like to share with the class, I'll post the links. Because I think it's important to see what people have. When I find things I like, I'm going to put them up. It doesn't necessarily mean I endorse something. It means that I think it has some use to you guys. But there are a lot of things out there. And feel free to play. Like Google and type in information and see what pops up. People are always bringing me cool stuff. So I definitely want to know. And Ben's really cool about that too. Ben Usach, when he comes in, he has like his fingers in everything. So he'll be able to tell you what's new and what's interesting and intriguing out there too. And he is scheduled to come in pretty soon. Everyone okay with the idea of the drug schedules at this point? Yeah. I mean, it's just an idea of classification. And again, we're talking about potential for abuse, not necessarily things that are going to be abused. Just because you take a Schedule 3 drug doesn't mean you will become addicted. It means that there is a potential for addiction out there. All right, so when we're talking about medication, we have to talk about the sources of medication. really there's two main classifications when we're talking about the medication and how they're made. We have synthetic and we have semi-synthetic. So synthetic is made completely in a lab. It's something that, you know, it doesn't really come in a clear form when it comes to nature. And then you have semi-synthetic, which is made from chemicals derived from plants, animals, or minerals. And it's kind of interesting when people are like, wait a minute, whoa, whoa, whoa. I take medication that comes from an animal? Oh yeah, you do. Big time. A lot of them are. A lot of them are. And it kind of makes me laugh a little bit. And again, just to kind of get on my soapbox a little bit, my cousin is a vegan. My cousin is a vegan, and she takes a lot of medication. And her feeling is she wants to know nothing about where it comes from, because it would get to the point where she would not want to take it. And my heart breaks for her, because she has to take these medications, but she's so strongly against it. It really is tough. I do feel for her. So in your text, it talks a little bit about medications and where they come from. The plant medication, we talked about digoxin with the foxglove. We talked about aspirin with the willow bark. Atropine, morphine. Morphine obviously comes from what plant? Poppies. Did everyone see Wizard of Oz? It was on the other night, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, poppies, yeah. So morphine, everyone got high in the Wizard of Oz. No one talks about it, but everyone was like, you know, completely stoned out of their mind in the Wizard of Oz. Poppies. So did she really melt? That's my question. Did she really melt? All right, so animal. Heparin, thyroid preparation, and insulin. Insulin is the big one. A lot of diabetics take insulin and they need to thank a pig. So that's definitely out there. Microorganisms. A lot of antibiotics come from microorganisms. And it's kind of funny because people think bacteria and they think bad, and people think microorganisms are things we need to kill, and the reality is they're not always. So it's kind of interesting. And a lot of minerals too. Iron is a big one. That really isn't, and a lot of those minerals are self-creating internally. Like you and I sitting here today have a lot of minerals floating around our system. So again, something you need to think about. We're going to go ahead and take a break. I'll see you guys at 10 after 7. Run. Huh? The FDA that various pharmaceutical companies do have to maintain to. So a lot of this comes from pharmaceutical companies. Some things that you guys need to be aware of when it comes to ingredients and preservatives. If your patient tells you that they have an allergy to a medication and it is a form of preservative, you have to be very cognizant of what goes into that medication and how it's preserved. Most patients will tell you. For instance, medications that are grown in eggs, medication that contain eggs, medication that contain traces of iodine. A lot of these things, or sodium. A lot of people have hypersensitivity to sodium, or sulfa medications. Sulfa drugs, yeah. Drugs, medication. But long and short of it, you guys have to be aware of that and have to talk to your patients and really think before you administer. So again, when it comes to this, my point was really just you have to be aware of the process by which the medications come to you. Medications must have manufacturing lot number and expiration date. Let's talk about expiration dates and why they drive me insane. Medications are often good, well beyond what they have as their expiration date. At the same time, there are things that can change the expiration date of the medication. For instance, if a medication is kept in a very hot ambulance, it might not necessarily have the shelf life that you would want it to. Certain medications, such as cardizem, have to be cold. So you have to keep it in either a refrigerator or you have to keep it in a cooler area. These are things you have to know about. If you fail to do so, that medication can essentially not necessarily work the way you want it to. So cardizem specifically is 30 days just on a 30-day rotation. So again, medication expiration dates aren't necessarily expiration dates that matter. It has to be how is that medication stored, are the things that go into it. Has anyone dealt at all with MREs, meals ready to eat? Okay, those are expirations that are very, I kind of use this as an example to kind of think about when you're dealing with medication expirations. So the MREs will tell you very specifically when you open it, like on the back, external portion of the box, the MRE will say expires June 2015. But then when you actually open it and you look at the insert, it's like, okay, so if stored under this condition, it's good for this amount of time. If stored under this condition, it's good for this amount of time, so on and so forth. And medication is very much the same way. So you'd have to actually open the inserts, read everything to ensure that things are good to a certain extent. At the same time, Pennsylvania specifically released a bulletin in 2013 that prolonged the amount of time that certain ambulance companies can utilize medication longer than the date of expiration. That came about because a lot of medication was really in need, wasn't necessarily being manufactured at the rate at which it was being consumed. So we had shortages, particularly here in Pennsylvania. So the Bureau of EMS, along with the Department of Health, released a bulletin that extended the ability for certain medications to be used if proof could be shown that that company couldn't necessarily make purchases. You okay there with that popcorn? Okay. All right. So there's a lot of different forms of medication. When you guys think about forms of medication pre-hospitally, what are we using? What form, how is that medication going to be given to you to administer? Okay, so medications that need to be given by IV.
Or tablets.
Tablets, sprays. Give me an example of a spray. Nitro. What's another way that nitroglycerin can be administered?
Tablets.
What? I've heard a lot of things. Okay, so paste. Tablet.
Sublingual.
It's not a form of medication, but it's a route. Yeah, absolutely. So patches. What other patch medication do we really use pre-hospitally? Not really. I think down, maybe some out in the middle of nowhere folks use patches, but I don't think so. Not often, at the very least. Tablets, powders, drops, skin preparation, suppository. Are we doing a lot of suppository pre-hospitally? I don't get paid enough. Liquids and inhalers and sprays. Do we use a lot of inhalers?
Albuterol.
Nebulizers?
Yeah.
It's inhaled,
Oxygen.
right? It's for inhalation. So yeah. So again, oftentimes when you guys watch TV, all paramedics do is draw medications up by syringe and administer IV, and we do so much more. We do work with capsules, we do work with pills, we do work with sprays, we do work with ointments. So again, when you guys are dealing with these medications, you guys have to be aware that it's going to come in many different forms, and different forms may have different doses because depending on how it's made and the form at which you get it, the absorption rate might be different. The way that the body can process that is going to be different. We're going to talk a little bit about that moving forward. So again, just be aware that medication comes in different ways. Auto-injectors. So some of it is going to be a solution. Some of it is a powder. So there are some auto-injectors that have a powder up top, and it's a separated solution. So it has like normal saline in one side, and when you push it, it'll actually take the powder and it'll drop it into the solution. So it depends. Yeah, Solumedrol isn't necessarily in an auto-injector form, but yeah, it's an example of something that's totally separate. Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right.
Yeah.
So, chemical name. When we're dealing with medications, you need to know that there are different ways that that medication is going to be referred to. Chemical name is what's used during the development of the medication. So when you are going through your clinical trial, when you are referring to it in literature about the medication, in studies, you're going to see it referred to by its chemical name. When you get into the generic name, it's really promoting consistency, and it's usually taken from the stem of the chemical name of that medication. So when you go to CVS and you say, can I get the generic, it's cheaper, right? You guys have all done that? Okay, wait a minute, doc, does this come in generic form? Because that's a little, that's something to consider, it's used to refer to it so it's consistent, but it's not necessarily what you would buy. It's not what you see in the commercial. And then you have the brand name, Lunesta, with a butterfly, right? Okay, that's not what it's called in the literature about it. And a lot of times, the medications for the brand name are easier to say. Because how many of you guys would regularly go into CVS and say, listen, I really need the diphenhydramine. My allergies are killing me. Can I have the diphenhydramine? Where's your diphenhydramine section? What is that?
Benadryl.
Isn't Benadryl a lot easier to say than diphenhydramine? Or acetaminophen? What's acetaminophen?
Oh no.
Right? Where's your, oh my gosh, I have such a headache. I really need your acetaminophen. Tylenol is so much easier to say, right? So again, it's a situation where it's the same medication, but it's referred to by different names. right? And this makes a big difference for us pre-hospitally, okay? Because patients will give you both, and they won't know which is which. So it's not concomitant, or concomitant, so I was trying to talk about Coumadin in a minute. For someone to say to you, well, I take warfarin sodium. That's Coumadin. But you might not necessarily think, oh, that's Coumadin. So it's important for you guys to have either a reference, like a PDR on your phone, physician's desk reference, or have a good working knowledge of generic names versus brand names. And when we do a lot of our scenario-based learning, we're going to throw that stuff at you. So it'll force you to look it up, because that's what you're going to get pre-hospitally. And you guys as EMTs who are active regularly know that you're going to get there, and they're not going to tell you that they take Coumadin. They're going to tell you that they take warfarin sodium, or whatever the generic is.
I take a bunch of stuff that's on the counter.
I take everything in the shoebox. Good luck. I peeled all the labels off because I didn't like them.
I mixed up.
So let's talk about medication and resources, and we talked about this a little bit. So the one I put on Blackboard is Hippocrates. You guys click around and find ones that you like. What I will tell you is that not all physician desk references are created equal, and not all PDRs, or physician desk reference, PDR, not all of them are published by a reliable source. So if you get someone like, Bob Smith developing a PDR, well, what are his credentials? Where is he coming from? Who is he part of? If you get something put forth by the American Heart Association, do you think it's probably pretty reliable? For the American Cancer Society, and you should see that one. So again, you have to make sure that it's published by a reliable source, something that is heard of, something that is regularly utilized by EMS. So you have to kind of consider that stuff. You need to also, what did I say about printed versus electronic, particularly in this day and age?
I want to go with electronic.
I'm a big book person. Like, I have my Kindle and I love it, but I think there's nothing better than on a rainy day, because I'm a big dork. Like sitting on a rainy day under a blanket, like my cup of tea and my book, like my real book. So I love books, but not for science, and not for medication, and not for medicine in general. Things update so rapidly. No, books are not bad. You gonna add something?
Fahrenheit 451 doesn't change from year to year.
Yeah, right, right. The classics aren't changing. So again, please make sure that you guys are aware of things that are able to be updated regularly. Made y'all look. And you have to make sure that it's in-depth information being offered. If you get a physician's desk reference electronically, and it's like aspirin, 324 milligrams, give it when it hurts. That's not what you want. You need to look for the information that's being provided to you. It should always tell you the indication, contraindication, dose, route of action, mechanism of action. Those are things that have to be pretty consistent when you're looking at that. So again, check out the Hippocrates, and that's a recognized standard that you guys can take in and find your own things. If you guys find things that you like and you want posted and you think are interesting, please shoot them along, and I'd be happy to put them up for you guys. Anytime you guys find something interesting, let's share it. So accessibility and cost. Kindles are great. I love my Kindle. At the same time, my Kindle doesn't fit in my pocket. So for me, because my phone is Android, and I don't have the Amazon phone, it's a little bit more expensive on my data plan to access my Kindle. So my PDR is for Android. I downloaded an Android app. You always have to look at how it's offered and the accessibility of the electronic or physical form that you're getting. Has anyone bought a field guide yet? I have one. The Pocket Field Guide,
Yeah.
like that little flip book.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone should get one, and you should update it regularly. And this is why. You don't want to be on a call and be so reliant on your phone, and your phone is dead. You didn't make it back to the station between your 15, 16 calls in your 12-hour shift, and you didn't have a chance to charge it. You should always have something to fall back on. Will it be the most updated information? No. Do you have to ensure that you update it regularly? Yes. Is it a worthwhile $15 investment? Yes. Infomed has a really good one. It's INFOOR Med. It's kind of the standard. American Heart Association does put one out, but it's more focused on cardiac stuff and stroke stuff versus just EMS in general. So again, Informed does have one that's utilized pretty often, pretty regularly. Just make sure that you're getting the most updated information. Okay. Availability of the updates. That's another big thing. If you guys are going to download an app that's going to be used for a physician desk reference, you need to see how often it's updated. If it's not updated at least weekly, it's crap. I'm sorry, that's the truth. You have to have something that updates at least weekly. Anything less is just not going to be feasible for you, particularly pre-hospitally. The other thing that I would suggest is make sure that there is, when you download one, that it has camera recognition capability. That way, if you have someone who hands you a white pill and says, I take this, and you can't find a bottle anywhere, most medication or PDRs now have an app where you can take a picture of it and it will help you identify. Is it 100%? No. But typically speaking, if it gives you a medication and it makes sense that that person will be taking it based on the past medical history that they've given you, chances are it's that. And at least you have something to go by in the moment. Okay, so make sure you have camera recognizing capability. So, medical profiles. Everyone should check this out. The United States Pharmacopedia National Formulary, or USPNF, should be something that you guys are visiting regularly. If you go onto the Department of Health, which is one of the links on Blackboard, it has it as one of the links. This is what is updated regularly and what the United States recognizes as the medications that are readily available in circulation. You guys need to have a general idea of that. Did you guys know that 3 new medications have come out in the last month that deal specifically with HIV-positive patients? Most of us don't follow things like that regularly. I have a very good friend who's HIV positive. That's the only reason I know. Did you guys know that Alzheimer patients, there's been about 6 new medications that have come out regularly? It's about 6 a month apparently. The only reason I know, my mom has Alzheimer's, so I'm really all about that stuff. Medications come out that rapidly, 6 in a month, that's out of control. And we're not talking derivatives. We're talking brand spanking new medications. That's crazy. And we're not necessarily talking just in the United States. So some of you guys are saying, well, wait a minute, if it's not being offered in the United States, how are my patients going to get it? You're going to find some funky stuff out there. Okay? Medications come in all different ways. They shouldn't necessarily be here. Okay, so if someone hands you a pill and they don't know what it's called, you need to use a lot of caution. Okay? But you should definitely be visiting the United States Pharmacopedia regularly, just to peruse and see what's there. If you go on the website, it actually is pretty cool because right at the very beginning, it gives you updates. Like this is new, this is what's coming out recently, this is what's slated to come out. It's actually kind of a cool website. Packaging inserts. Packaging inserts are great when people keep them. How many people could say that in their ambulance, when you open up your NAR kit, there's a bunch of paper in there so that you guys can read all the information? No one keeps that stuff. What do people do? They open their medications, they take the inserts, and they chuck them. Particularly elderly patients. Let's come off the ambulance for a minute. Let's talk about Grandma Smith and Grandpa Smith. Grandma and Grandpa Smith each take a huge amount of medication. And it's really difficult for them to keep track of everything. So what do they want to do almost immediately? They want to get rid of stuff, right? They want to get rid of all the inserts and all the packaging because they don't want the clutter, or even worse, they keep everything. And what do? They immediately put everything in their Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday pill organizer, which is great for them. And it really makes their lives a lot easier. It's really hard for us because when we get there, there's no bottles. There's old bottles. There's bottles that have like moisture on them that we don't even know where that moisture comes from, so that we can't read what we're saying. People don't keep the inserts, and even worse, people don't read that insert. It's scary. It's scary to think that people would take things and put things in their body without reading all the information. And yet, when was the last time you guys went to CVS to buy something over the counter and sat and really read everything?
I do.
Yeah.
Some of it'll scare you, yeah,
The
absolutely.
side effects, I mean,
Oh my gosh, it's terrifying. Yeah.
And I just screwed up with ZQuil. I didn't know that the only active ingredient in ZQuil is Benadryl. I took ZQuil and Benadryl together. So I got 100 milligrams of Benadryl later. I slept pretty good.
Much like that NyQuil in my chaser. Never again. Things you learn. I'm pretty sure if I had read that insert, it would have said, don't take with alcohol.
But they also.
So now we know that you're sitting at home like, but even so. All right, so the dosing information that you're going to find on the packets is the dose, the route of administration, contraindication, and adverse effects. So what is dosing?
How much?
How much? What is route of administration?
How
How's
much?
it gonna
How are we going to give me an example of a route? IM, sublingual, IV, rectal, oral, nasal. Ooh, yeah, IO, all right. Go big or go home. Contraindications, what's that?
Reason to not take it.
Reason not to give it. Are these cautionary or are these like, no?
Like,
These are no, don't do it, unacceptable. Some of them are cautionary though, right? Some of the contraindications are cautionary. A lot of us just learned about cautionary versus no when we come to the oxygen administration COPD, right? Okay, so some of it is cautionary. And then adverse effects, side effects.
You're gonna get a headache when you take this.
You might get a headache, yeah. But here's the difference, okay? Do you want me to,
Unintended
after you get stung by a
reactions.
bee, do you want me to administer the epinephrine and give you a nasty headache? Or do you want to breathe? I mean, those are options. Which do you want? So adverse effects are things that we know could happen, but are not necessarily going to happen. And they're unintended consequences. So, hospitals. Different hospitals are going to stock different things. Just like hospitals stocking different things for their area, ambulances do the same thing. Do you think out in the middle of nowhere, when you have a population of 5 people to 16 cows, they're really going to be stocking a huge amount of Narcan? If you go into Philadelphia, you think we're stocking a lot of Narcan? If you no comment. But at the same time, you really have to stock your vehicles, and if you're part of a company or a purchasing agency in your company or ambulance organization, you know this. You know that you take the list that's given out by Pennsylvania and you stock the bare necessities, but then you go back and you restock what you use regularly. So again, just like hospitals, just like hospital pharmacies stock what they need for their specific uses, we stock what we need for our specific uses as well. What do you think in particular of this area that we would stock where people out in another state might not necessarily stock? Is there anything specific to our region that we would have to stock? Any medication specific to our region that maybe, like Florida doesn't have to? Or let's do it this way. What would Florida have to stock that we don't necessarily have to stock?
Antivenoms.
What's that?
A lot more antivenoms and stuff like that.
Antivenoms, yeah, absolutely. That's kind of exactly what I was going for. Did you guys hear about, and this is because it's only in my neck of the wood, Upper Darby, someone was unloading in a giant, a crate of bananas and got stung by a black widow?
We had a scorpion.
Took him over to Merck.
Yeah.
At least we're close.
Yeah, right? Thank God we're pretty close to Philadelphia, right? Good Lord. But yeah, could you imagine? We're in Florida, if you get a call for a black widow, it's like, again. Okay, so again, yeah, maybe they're, or at the very least, if they're not stocking antivenom, they know the hospitals that are stocking antivenom. What about this? Where do you go here locally for people who are in labor and delivery? Your L&D patients. Abington, okay. Okay, Einstein, okay, St. Mary's, all that, okay. In my area, I can tell you where you don't go. You don't go to Springfield Hospital. They don't know what to do for an L&D patient. You get there and they're like, okay. For that, you would need to go to like Crozier. You can't go to Mercy and Fitzgerald anymore because they don't have that. So do you think that those hospitals are really stocking huge amounts of L&D medications? No. So again, you have to kind of be aware of this only because you need to have a good idea if a patient needs a specific thing, where to take them. So if that black widow bite had come in, where would we take them in this general area?
It's downtown.
I love that term, downtown, because that's
City,
like, just go to
to
Philly.
Philly.
Just start driving to Philly. I don't know where you're going to end up, but it's better in Philly, go.
To the zoo.
Not north side.
A phone call might actually be made to the zoo, yeah, absolutely.
Over to
no doubt.
Lansdale to Merck.
But you can. No? Did you say Merck? Merck would be called
That's what
for
we
that?
make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Are you involved in that? So, like, if I die of a black widow spider,
I could let you in.
You do what?
I could let you in. At Health Services, because we work with them there, that people from the local area, I guess they go out and do like service things to let people know that if that were the case, that they could come there.
So we can call Mark and send somebody to come pick stuff up?
Mhm. We supply it at
That's
the very
really
least.
cool.
I think
But we
the
have
zoo
doctors
stock-
on site,
the zoo
so they're
stocks
allowed
some
to.
stuff, too. Well, I was told that Philly Zoo won't give it out, that they only stock
The
it
zoo
up for
gets
some
some
sales.
Have you?
Yeah, Pittsburgh has a quantity they said they're willing to fly out.
It's
When you were
nuts.
talking about Florida, that's Venom 1 out of Miami-Dade.
Yeah.
If you go to their website,
yeah,
if you got a credit card, they'll send someone licensed orange or put something FedEx Air to get you what you need, or you can fly your patient to them from anywhere in the world.
That's pretty awesome.
Give me a 95 for one.
All right. All right. So, American Medical Association drug evals provide a lot of information very rapidly. So, when you're dealing with medication, it has to go through a process, and the American Medical Association is going to be the one that's going to give you the information about the selection of medication and about how to administer it. So, when you guys take ACLS and CPR, there's going to be like the science portion, the science update. And all that information is going to say, this is how we got all this information. AMA is going to be one of the things listed. It's kind of like the credits to the medical world. We've got to give our credits. So that's kind of one of the things that we talk about. Where does this information come from and who compiles it all? Let's talk about medication storage. Not everybody understands the proper way to store medications. One of the things that drives me absolutely up a wall is people take medications at the beginning of their shift and pocket them. Just in case I need it. Really? Okay, that's so wrong on so many levels, I can't even begin to tell you. And yes, it happens. Yes, it happens. I will never forget. I went in, and I was a brand new EMT, and one of my partners, we were dispatched to a possible fracture, and he had Dunkin' Donuts coffee, opened the back of the truck, walked in, grabbed morphine, stuffed it in his pocket, and started walking up. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we carry that in the bag, you idiot. What's wrong with you? So there's a lot of reasons wrong with that. Number one, it's a medication that has to be tracked. Everything has to be accounted for. But then the other thing, what happens when you take medication and you put it in your pocket?
It could break.
It could break, depending on what it is. Vials are not the sturdiest of thing. I'm sorry. You could forget about it. What else?
Gets hot.
It gets hot. Do you think heat's probably a good thing for most medications? Okay, what else?
The appearance of theft is there?
Okay, yeah. How about you? If I come up to you, all right, and I say to you, have you guys ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Yes.
At the very end, say no. Did you live under a rock? Okay. Okay.
Christmas
So-
assignment.
So here's the thing, like remember right at the very end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the kid's sitting there and he offers it to the principal. Do you want a gummy? It's been in my pocket and it's all warm and sticky. Would you really want, like a medic to come up to your house and be like, here, I have some morphine for you. It's warm from my body. Like, I'm sorry. I'd be like, get out of my house. That's disgusting. I don't necessarily know that I would take it. Okay. If I was what? If I was paid, I might take it right. But even so, I'm just saying. Like, ooh, right. All right. So medication storage, you need to have adequate protection for it, particularly with our narcotics. Things have to be under lock and key, and there has to be a system to get it out. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry who works on the truck shouldn't have access to it. There's a big thing right now in Pennsylvania legislation where the new rules and regulations actually require it to be a dual locking system. You have to have 2 locks to get to your narcs. Now, there's a big uproar because those of us who have been on the street for a while are like, whoa, when I need this narc box, like I need to get access pretty quick. So we're getting a lot of information out there, and a lot of people are like coming to Pennsylvania with their suitcases and their like top hats, like, hey, we've got stuff for you, like biometrics. We'll take everyone's fingerprints. It'll be easy access, really fast, and they'll have dual locking mechanisms. So again, it has to have adequate protection, but at the same time, it has to have easy access. It has to make sense. You can't have like a chain around the medication box and have that, potentially make sense. It has to be something that it makes sense. One of the strangest things I have ever seen, I just did an ambulance spot check, and the O2 wrench was on the narc keys, that was on the truck keys. What's the problem with that? Right. So if I need to get to my narcs, where I need to open a bottle of oxygen, we have to pull over? I can't answer that question. But at the same time, does that make any sense at all? That's like having the oxygen stored at the feet. What's wrong with you? So anyway, so again, it has to be convenient and easy.